She grew up in San Bernardino. Same streets, same city that counted her out before she finished high school. She left at 22 and did not look back. She came home on a Friday evening in full navy dress blues. Rows of ribbons aligned, gold trident on her chest, the weight of 16 years in every step. She had just left a memorial service for a fallen teammate. She was walking to her car when the lights hit her. "Step away from the vehicle. Where did you get that uniform?" The deputy's name was Garrett Colson. 9 years with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. 14 buried complaints, every one of them filed by a person of color, every one following the same pattern. He had built a career on certainty. He looked at the woman standing calm on those church steps, ribbons, trident, posture unbroken, and made a decision he could not take back. That decision would send him to federal prison for 58 years. Because the woman he had just placed in handcuffs was Lieutenant Commander Pamela Hamilton, Navy SEAL, 6 combat deployments, Navy Cross, and a service record the Pentagon had spent years building. Colson did not know any of that. The Pentagon did. Before we go any further, if you have ever watched someone get dismissed because of what they look like, not what they have earned, drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. And if you are new here, this channel tells the stories they do not put in the headlines. Hit subscribe so you never miss one. The call came in at 7:42 on a Friday evening. An anonymous tip, a suspicious black woman in a military costume, lingering near the steps of Greater Faith Baptist Church on South Waterman Avenue. The caller did not leave a name. Deputy Garrett Colson took the call. He had worked the east side of San Bernardino long enough to trust his instincts about what belonged and what did not. He pulled into the church parking lot with the kind of confidence that comes from 9 years of being backed up, signed off on, and never seriously questioned. Lieutenant Commander Pamela Hamilton was standing beside her car. She was not lingering. She had just walked out of a 2-hour memorial service for Petty Officer First Class Andre Willis, a teammate killed in action 11 weeks earlier in eastern Syria. She had given one of the eulogies. She had stood at the front of the church in the uniform she had earned, the same uniform she wore to every formal occasion that asked her to represent the men and women she had served beside. The uniform was precise. Navy service dress blues, dark jacket, white shirt, black tie. Her lieutenant commander shoulder boards sat clean on each arm. The Navy Cross hung at the top of her ribbon stack. The special warfare insignia, the gold trident that fewer than 1 in 5 candidates ever hold, was centered exactly on her left chest. She had dressed that morning with the care of someone who understood what each piece of it meant. Colson did not see any of that. He was out of his patrol car before it stopped fully, hand already near his weapon, eyes locked on the uniform the way a person looks at something they have already decided is wrong. He told her to step away from the vehicle. He asked her where she got the uniform. Pamela raised both hands slowly. She told him her name, her rank, her branch. She told him she had just come from a memorial service inside the church he was standing in front of. Her voice was controlled, even. She had been in situations where staying controlled was the only thing standing between a bad outcome and a worse one. Colson told her to put her hands behind her back. She offered her military identification card. He took it, held it for 3 seconds, handed it back, and told her anyone could print a fake. She offered her orders, official leave papers from Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, sitting in the center console of her car. He told her he did not need to see anything from her car. By this point, the steps of Greater Faith Baptist were crowded with parishioners who had lingered after the service. A woman near the door called out that she knew who Pamela was. Someone else started recording on a phone. Then another phone. Then 3 more. Colson radioed for backup. In his report, he would later describe her as belligerent, a possible stolen valor suspect who had refused to cooperate. The body cam footage would tell a different story. It would show a woman standing still, hands visible, voice level, offering every form of verification she had while a deputy dismissed each one in turn. He told her to remove the uniform. There on the public steps of a church, in front of her congregation and her fallen teammate's family, he told her to take it off. She did not move. The congregation went quiet. Someone said something under their breath that no recording would capture. The church bells had gone silent 20 minutes ago when the service ended. The parking lot held nothing now, except the sound of a deputy's radio, a woman's controlled breathing, and the distant whine of a second patrol car turning onto South Waterman. What Colson did not know, what he had no reason to consider because he had spent 9 years operating without consequence, was that the woman in front of him had run into a kill zone in northern Iraq in 2016 while under direct fire. She had done it 3 times. She had dragged 3 wounded teammates out of the open while the air support she was waiting for was still 12 minutes away. She had held a position alone for 12 of those minutes, and the position had held. The Navy had given her the cross for it, the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star with Valor device. She had not flinched then. She did not flinch now. The backup sirens were 2 blocks away when Colson tightened his grip on her arm and the handcuffs clicked into place. The body cam caught the sound. The phones caught the sound. The family of Petty Officer Andre Willis, still standing on the church steps in their morning clothes, caught the sound. The woman they were watching in handcuffs had grown up 12 blocks from this church. She had left San Bernardino at 22 with nothing the city gave her and everything she had built for herself. She had passed a selection process where 80% of candidates quit or were cut. She had gone to war 6 times and come home 6 times, each time with something the uniform now reflected. None of that had followed her home tonight. None of that had mattered to Garrett Colson. But the Pentagon was about to find out what happened on these steps. And when it did, the 14 complaints Colson had buried for 9 years would not stay buried any longer. The second patrol car rolled to a stop at the edge of the parking lot as the handcuffs locked into place. 2 officers climbed out. They took in the scene without moving. The woman in dress blues standing at the driver's door, hands secured behind her back, a crowd of churchgoers pressed against the steps. One of the officers looked at the ribbons on her chest. He had done 2 years in the Army before joining the department. He recognized the Navy Cross immediately. He did not say anything yet. Colson told them she was a stolen valor suspect, refused to cooperate, possibly disturbed. The officer who had recognized the ribbons glanced at his partner. Neither moved toward Pamela. Colson's voice climbed. He told them he had already checked the ID, told them it looked printed. He pointed to the trident, the shoulder boards, the ribbons, and said the whole thing was a costume put together by someone who had done some research. He had seen it before, he said. People wanted the respect without the service. Pamela asked, without raising her voice, if she could retrieve her official orders from the center console of her car. The leave papers from Coronado, the travel authorization with the naval station letterhead, and the commanding officer's signature. Colson said no. The officer who had done 2 years in the Army walked a few steps toward the car and looked through the window. He could see papers on the center console. He could see what looked like a government form, folded once, the kind that came with a military travel packet. He told Colson they might want to take a look at those. Colson told him they did not need to look at anything. He said the situation was under control. One of the parishioners near the steps called out. She said she knew this woman, said she had grown up in this neighborhood, that her mother still attended this church, that she had come home to bury a brother in arms and this was what she came home to. The crowd tightened. Phones stayed up. The body cam on Colson's vest recorded everything. The ribbons, the crowd, the papers visible through the car window, the officer standing 3 feet away who had stopped agreeing. Then Colson turned to his backup and said it. He did not lower his voice. He did not seem to think he needed to. He said she was black. He said to look at her. He asked if they really thought she was a Navy SEAL. The parking lot went quiet in the way that spaces go quiet when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. The church bells were still. The crowd on the steps stopped murmuring. The officer who had done 2 years in the Army looked at Colson for a long moment. Then he looked at Pamela. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Why do some officers look at a black woman in full military uniform, every ribbon earned, every credential present, and decide before asking a single question that it has to be fake? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you have ever witnessed something like this, we want to hear it. This channel exists for stories like this one. The officer dialed the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado quarterdeck directly. He had the number from a liaison contact he had used twice on prior cases involving military personnel. The line picked up on the second ring. He identified himself and his department. He said he had a situation involving a woman who claimed to be an active-duty Navy SEAL, Lieutenant Commander Pamela Hamilton, and he needed a verification. The voice on the other end asked him to hold. 90 seconds passed. 90 seconds in which Colson said nothing. in which the crowd on the steps did not move, in which Pamela stood with her hands behind her back and her uniform wrinkled at the wrists, and her eyes fixed on something in the middle distance that none of the people around her could see. The voice came back on the line. It confirmed that Lieutenant Commander Pamela Hamilton was active-duty Navy personnel, currently on approved leave, assigned to SEAL Team 3 out of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. It confirmed her rank. It confirmed her service states. It asked if there was anything further needed. The officer said no. He thanked the voice and ended the call. He looked at Colson. Colson looked at Pamela. The certainty that had carried him through 9 years of this department, through 14 complaints, through every situation he had walked into already knowing what he was going to find, that certainty was gone. What replaced it was something quieter and much more permanent. He had said what he said on a body cam, on 6 separate phones, in front of 40 people, standing on the steps of a church. The backup officer reached for Pamela's wrists and began working the cuffs. The quarterdeck operator at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado had a protocol for calls like this one. Civilian law enforcement contacting the base to verify the identity of a SEAL, an active-duty SEAL currently on approved leave, currently in handcuffs in a church parking lot in her own hometown. That call did not stay at the quarterdeck. It moved. Within 4 minutes of the line going dead, the Naval Special Warfare Command duty officer had been notified. Within 11 minutes, the notification had reached the Pentagon's Naval Operations Center. The sheriff of San Bernardino County was asleep when his personal cell phone rang. His chief of staff was on the line. The chief of staff did not have a habit of calling at this hour. The sheriff sat up in the dark and listened. By the time the call ended, he was already standing, already moving toward the closet, already calculating the distance to the station in civilian traffic at 9 in the evening. He did not take the time to change into his uniform. At the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado, 2 Navy JAG attorneys had been called at home and were already in their cars heading north on Interstate 5. At the NCIS field office in San Diego, a duty agent had opened a case file. In Washington, a flag officer had been briefed. The words active duty SEAL and arrested and racial profiling had appeared in the same sentence in a secure federal communication, and the machinery that sentence set in motion was not slow, and it was not quiet. Pamela was in the booking area of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Station when the sheriff walked through the door. She had not been processed. The officer who had uncuffed her in the parking lot had driven her to the station himself, and when they arrived, he had told the booking sergeant to hold everything. He did not explain why. He did not need to. Something in the way he said it communicated that the situation had moved past the point where standard procedure applied. Pamela sat in a chair against the wall. Her jacket was wrinkled at both sleeves from the cuffs. She had straightened the ribbons twice since they arrived. The trident was still centered. Her posture had not changed since the parking lot. Back straight, shoulders level. The bearing of someone who had spent years in environments where composure was not a courtesy, but a survival requirement. A desk officer had offered her water. She had accepted it. She had not asked for a phone call. She had not asked for anything. She already knew that what was moving toward this station was moving on her behalf, and she understood better than anyone in this building what federal machinery in motion actually looked like. The sheriff came through the door in dark slacks and a collared shirt, his badge clipped to his belt. He was a large man who moved carefully, the way people move when they are aware of how much space they take up. He scanned the booking area. When he found Pamela, he walked directly to her. He sat down in the chair across from her. He said he had been briefed on the way over. He said there were no words for what had happened tonight. He said he was sorry. Pamela looked at him. She said that the incident was now in Pentagon hands. She said it without heat, without performance. She said it the way a person states a fact that requires no elaboration. The sheriff nodded slowly. He reached over and removed a plastic property bag from the booking table beside her. Her military ID, her leave papers, her car keys, and set it in front of her without being asked. In the hallway outside the booking area, Deputy Garrett Colson had been waiting for 40 minutes. He had given his account to a watch commander, who had not written much of it down. 2 supervisors had walked past him without making eye contact. His radio had been taken. No one had told him what was happening inside. The federal charges would come within 72 hours. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Civil rights violations. The 14 prior complaints, buried across 9 years, signed off by 3 different supervisors, ignored through 4 separate internal review cycles, were pulled from departmental records and handed to federal investigators the following morning. Each one was now evidence. Each one was now a thread in a pattern that a federal prosecutor would spend the next 16 months pulling apart in a courtroom. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Colson's attorney argued that the arrest had been made in good faith, based on an anonymous tip. The body cam footage ran for the jury without interruption. The recording of what Colson had said in the parking lot, the sentence about her being black, the sentence about whether anyone really thought she was a SEAL, ran twice. The 14 prior complaints were entered into evidence one by one. 11 of the people who had filed them came to testify. The jury took less than 4 hours. Garrett Colson was sentenced to 58 years in federal prison. On the evening of his sentencing, Pamela Hamilton was at her mother's house, 12 blocks from Greater Faith Baptist Church. She had been there the night of the arrest, after the sheriff's station, after the JAG attorneys had taken her statement in a conference room that smelled of old coffee. She had driven herself. She had walked in through the front door, set her keys on the table by the entryway the way she had done since she was a teenager, and sat down in the kitchen while her mother made food without being asked. She had gone to war 6 times. She had come home 6 times. She had survived selection, survived Iraq, survived Syria, survived the kind of institutional forgetting that happens to people. The system decides it does not need to remember. She had come home to bury a teammate and been arrested on church steps in her own city, in a uniform that represented every year of everything she had built, by a man who looked at her and saw something that needed to be stopped. The Pentagon had not forgotten her. And in the end, it was not spectacle that undid Garrett Colson. It was not outrage or protests or headlines. It was the body cam footage, the phone recordings, the 14 case files pulled from a cabinet where someone had decided they could sit forever. It was the machinery of accountability, doing exactly what it was designed to do when the right person finally refused to let it stop. Some people spend 9 years believing they are beyond consequence. They are not. They are only waiting to arrest the wrong person.